Yeah, go ahead.
The Thug?
Definitely The Thug. I was watching a movie yesterday, and it was as sort of, how to put it, sort of a primitive, uneducated group of people.
Okay.
I think that's another.
I think The Servant?
Yeah, definitely the servant to the white person, or white people, or white family.
A lot of the stereotypes that are present and evident in films are basically versions of the stereotypes that exist outside of films too. I mean, if you think about the ways that African Americans have been distorted in American society, a lot of that is very, very evident in movie making. And a lot of the modern American entertainment, whether it's movies or popular music or a lot of things, are really very directly descended from the minstrel shows of the 1800s, which were at one point the most popular form of entertainment in the United States, in which, as part of the show, you would often have white people in blackface and in these very caricatured attempts to perform blackness that were just the most hideous, ridiculous stereotypes. But they were designed to make some very direct points. You would have the kind of silly or clownish African American, particularly somebody who was black and was trying to interact in the white world, and people would laugh and say, "Oh, look how foolish they are. They're so childlike. They're so silly. They're so stupid." Right? All those sort of stereotypes. Then you would have the kind of what's been known as the black brute stereotype. Of this sort of dangerous African American, usually a black man, although black women certainly get stereotyped as this too. Who would be perceived as just very dangerous, violent, animalistic. We have to stop them. We have to protect particularly white women from them. That stereotype shows up a lot in movies. One of the most prominent early films in Hollywood is The Birth of a Nation, which is basically a love letter to the Ku Klux Klan, and was the first kind of big blockbuster that Hollywood produced, to the point where even the President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, said this is history written in lightning, right? Like, this is the President of the United States in 1915 or 16, I can't remember when that movie came out, basically saying not only is this a good movie, but this is exactly what happened, which is outrageous. It's an outrageous lie, and was actually used by a lot of people who wanted to segregate or even lynch African Americans. You have, the mammy stereotype, the idea that black women in particular, although black men as well, are designed to serve white people, and they love it. This idea that black women in particular can be such nurturing, loving figures for white families, and they love the white children more than they love their own children. They're often desexualized. They're often presented as just these kind of nurturing figures, right? Which is designed to prop up the belief among a lot of white Americans that black folks not only want to serve white people, but are meant to serve white people. Those are some of the major ones. And in films, you can see a lot of this, whether it's, African American characters who are designed to be just comic, like, haha, isn't this funny? And, you hear a lot about even certain kinds of behaviors, right? Like, kind of bugging eyes out, or doing even particular characterizations are designed to affirm that. Or the ton of black characters to this day who are presented in films with the basic purpose of helping white people. They have no other purpose in the movie other than to be helpful and even mystical in the way they help. The filmmaker Spike Lee has referred to this, I think, very accurately as the, quote, super magic Negro, right? This idea of this black person whose only role in life is to just help out white folks. But you can also see it in the way that, dangerous black characters are often presented as very dangerous and stereotyped in that way. There's a lot of others too, but those are some of the big ones. And what's really, I think, interesting but also very frustrating is that in some ways we've progressed, right? You are not as likely in a film to see blackface performances, even though you would have been likely to even into the 40s and 50s. Of course, we know blackface hasn't gone away. We're reminded of that seemingly every week on social media. But you're not likely to see that kind of stuff. And you're not likely to see maybe the worst things that you would have seen decades ago. But at the same time, you are still very likely to see a lot of caricatured, stereotyped characters, and you're not necessarily going to see the richness and diversity of Black life. And a lot of people right now are talking about the difference between film and TV in that way. That you look at TV right now, whether it's Blackish or Atlanta or Queen Sugar or all these TV shows and many others are trying to present a much richer view and a much more Black-centered view, whereas Hollywood films may be getting better in some ways, but you still are left with a very limited view that is not contradicted by more accurate representations. So you're left with stereotyped gangster characters, stereotyped super magic Negro, to use Spike Lee's words, comic character. You're left with that same old bag of stereotypes that we've been dealing with in movies since movies began, and even 100 years before that on the stages of the minstrel shows.
Mm-hmm.
Dance really well, and they're good at basketball and sports, and they are like homeless and poor and not very smart and like struggling.
What are some examples of like movies that you see this in?
Straight Outta Compton. What's the one where the football player came right off the street? He went to like Briarcrest. The Blind Side. Yeah,
Side.
that movie.
Okay. Cool.
I feel like typically a lot of the movies are like about kids struggling to like get out of the hood and like struggling to pay for their education, and that's like a big representation. And then there's also like a lot of really typical stereotypes used in like comedy movies that are intended to be funny, I guess. Yeah.
What are some of these movies that you feel do this? Give us some examples.
Examples of movies. I feel like a lot of the movies I've seen, like I remember I had to watch one movie called Finding Forrester in one of my classes, and it was like supposed to be really inspirational, and it was because this white guy like helped this Black kid like get out of the hood. Like I thought it was a good movie at the time, but now I'm just kind of looking back on it and like I don't know. I wish that they would have more movies about people who are oppressed kind of like getting out of the system on their own, and more leaders of color, and not that you always need like a white privileged person to help you get out of those situations.
Well, it's like I know, like in the past, like in movies, like white people would do like blackface in movies to play characters of like minorities, and they would play them like very stereotypically. And I know in that one movie, Birth of a Nation, there's one character in blackface who's like a rapist and got terrible, just awful, like the villain.
I don't know what the question was. What was it?
Blackface.
What are your thoughts on blackface? Like, how do you think why do you think it's like seen as offensive?
Because it was playing with the stereotypes of all black folks. Not to mention they look hideous.
Cool.
Well, I mean, it's as long as I've been aware of it, I mean, it's been seen as distasteful. Doesn't mean that people don't do it or haven't done it. And it's been very offensive, but in my time, it was never like an accepted practice that people did in mainstream entertainment.
No.
And it was, of course, always accompanied not just by the blackface, but by behaviors that were very stereotypical, the sort of pickaninny sort of stereotype and simple, meaning unintelligent people going to these simple acts to amuse. So it was demeaning.
Yes. The most recent thing I can even think of with the blackface was that movie Soul Man from the 90s.
It was from the 80s, I think.
From the 80s. It was ridiculous. It was a ridiculous
really dumb
premise. And I thought they didn't get it.
My thoughts on blackface.
Yeah, like how do you think it could be seen as offensive?
Well, it's appropriating culture is like a really big umbrella topic that blackface falls under, and especially with like Halloween costumes, I feel like we've seen it a lot, and blackface is super offensive just because you're literally like dressing up as this culture, especially when white people do it, and it's dressing up as a culture that you've been systematically oppressing for such a long time, and then thinking it's funny to dress up as a culture that you've been putting down for centuries.
It's like an escape. So one of the periods in my life where I was like very, I guess I would say depressed. There was this band that I was very into, and like being so intensely like devoted to their music, I guess, allowed me to like kind of step out of my own mind, during the time that I was listening to them, which was like every single day for like a year. I listened to their like albums like on repeat, so like I know their albums like front to back, and like there'd be some times where I would just like focus on the lyrics, or other times I would just listen to the music, and other times, like when you listen to songs, like it's always a different experience because there's always something that you miss. So like music allows you to like analyze things and also step out of your own mind. And like going to concerts is really fun. So music is fun.
Okay, I guess we're gonna start with me. I think the purpose of music is to let emotions run wild through another form of art, because music is definitely art, and however you portray it, like however you put those words, even if it's not even words in the music, but the instruments, all of them form together to express a certain feeling. So, and talk to the masses in another type of way versus like reading a book or watching a movie. So music is another way to get through people, I guess.
Music for me, I guess, is an outlet. Personally, I think that music is a form of expression, a way of expressing how you feel in a way that you might not be comfortable with expressing in another form. And music is also, I think, just there to make people feel good. Like music just makes you feel better, it lifts your spirits. So that's why I appreciate it.
I think the purpose of music is to give people an artistic outlet through people listening to things, and I feel like music is when you put something to a beat, people think of the implications of it more. I feel like when it's not just like words being spoken.
So, Fuck the Police is basically a black response to police brutality. I mean, like, it's what happens when you have it's just like this younger generation of rappers. It's, like when hip hop became like anthem. It's like hip hop became renowned as the part of music that was for the younger generation that they could escape to, that they could let out their expressions on. So, like, the funny thing though is that like you have this group of like they're already labeled criminals just because of the way they look, because of the way they act, because of the way they're speaking. But if you realize like they're living this on a daily, like their reality is that cops are the oppressor. So when you have that and you create this turmoil, it's like, okay, so this is how I feel. This is what you can get. This is like my response to you being like my oppressor, I guess. So yes, that's what I think.
was good. As Brian said, like the first question, like making music to like talk about like an issue or like expressing yourself.
Yeah.
It was definitely.
And you can kind of resonate with. Well, I know I can. I don't know about you, Will, but I can resonate with the message, and because it kind of has problems like that today.
Yeah, definitely.
So I feel like NWA is like the typical rap group everyone's heard about, and I think everyone's heard this song, but they don't really think about all of the frustration that's actually in it and the meaning behind it. And especially with our generation, you know, every time we turn on the news, I feel like we hear about another black guy getting shot by the police, and a lot of people think that it's a more recent problem, but in reality it's been an issue for as long as we've had police officers. And I think that this song, while it's entertaining and it's meant to entertain, it really has a deep connotation of the frustration of black men in this country.
This song is definitely clearer than the others. This talks about like police like violence towards black people pretty clearly, and they're like their verdict is against white people, and it's kind of funny because at the end like the white person screams like I want justice, but I don't know, black people never get justice. I think it's supposed to be ironic.
So my first impression of the song is that there's a lot going on. I feel like it's definitely easy to get mixed up with all the different sounds, like on top of the lyrics as well, because like there's obviously a deeper meaning. And so like even reading the lyrics while listening to the music, I had a hard time like following what exactly he was trying to talk about, just because like the music was so overwhelming. But yeah, that was my first impression.
I've seen it. I've heard the whole album before, so I kind of read it as him getting towards institutional racism. So I liked how in Wesley's theory, like he does talk about like this girl, but he also goes into like money and like material things, which I really do like. So it's kind of like the African American thing that we like to stay close to our material things, and like, you know, like he says, what you want, you know, a house or a car, you know. So I like how he goes into that as well. So it's really artistic too, and the instruments are phenomenal.
To piggyback off of what Emma is saying, like I think because of like the different instruments, the different sounds, like it just kind of is a little bit cohesive with the fact that this is a black man making this song. Like it's so many different. It's like just picture being a black man in, you know, the United States with all these things going on in your head. Like it's gonna create madness. It's gonna create chaos, and that's what I love about the song. Like it's my first time hearing it, so. To go off of what Emma was saying, I mean, the fact that he says, you know, he's talking about these material things, he also says, what you want, 10 acres and a mule, kind of tying it back to the fact that we're not too far from where we used to be as African Americans in the United States. So, yeah, so that's pretty cool that an artist in 2016 or 2015 would go back that far.
So I had never actually heard that song before, but I enjoyed it. And so it took me a while to get it because there was a lot of hidden metaphors and like underlying meaning to it. But as far as I can understand, it's about kind of like systematically beating down black people who are like successful, and especially those who are uneducated and those who are successful in like the music industry, because there's a lot of, in pop culture, there were a lot of pop culture references in it.
So I was trying to figure out who Lucy was the whole time, and Lucy is Lucifer. And the fact that Lucy is Lucifer, the fact that Lucy is Lucifer in the song, and Kendrick Lamar is black as a black man, like and the whole time Lucy is like just basically saying that she's gonna give Kendrick all of these things, and the fact that she's doing that kind of makes you feel like, well, damn, like as an African American, am I always gonna have to kind of sell my soul in order to get, you know, ahead in life? Like, am I always gonna have to take the wrong way out? And if I don't take the wrong way out, am I considered a sellout? So Kendrick is really like bomb with trying to make you ask yourself these questions that you really don't want to ask yourself. Like, so I think that's really incredible as an artist. So
Yeah, going off of what Amari said, I think the song definitely like has a really major focus on like the value of material things, and like as a Black person in America, especially like a Black rapper in America, it's like in the whole genre of hip hop. I think there's a lot of praise and like glorification of like attaining a lot of material things, and so like the means by which you go through to attain those material things, I think says a lot about that person. But especially as a Black male, growing up in the environment that Kendrick did grow up in, or that any urban like Black male grew up in, those, like Amari said, making like certain choices can definitely like have a big effect on you. And like I just thought I like appreciated that he talks about it in the song, because I definitely do think that's one thing that needs to be discussed more, especially when it comes to like hip hop as a whole. There is a lot of, I mean, everyone wants the nice cars, everyone wants the money, everyone wants the nice stuff, but no one wants to talk about how you get there or how you get those things.
Yeah, they just kind of touched on like the big picture I saw was like Lucifer and also material things. So, I mean, aside of the lyrics, I really liked the combination of like the soft instruments and like also Kendrick kind of talking more than just like it being like a rap competition. It was more of him just like talking with himself and also addressing Lucifer. I liked when he was like, you know, Lucifer told me this and like I do this for you and I like and so he talks about, he also hints at like drugs and like smoking weed and drinking alcohol and like all these things that can also control you besides the material things. Like so it's a lot of things that go into play in his community with him growing up in Compton, which he, like everyone knows about Kendrick if you listen to Kendrick, so it's like a lot of things that go behind where he's come from too. So
I was pretty confused, but I think he's comparing himself to someone, I think, because he like keeps referencing you a lot and how he's like you. That's all I got.
On the song.
Yeah, you knew from the beginning that it would be like somber, and then when she started singing the lyrics, you could tell what she was implying by like the blood on the roots and the fruit hanging from the trees. Because you know she's actually talking about like the hangings that have happened in centuries and forever. And I think it was really smart of her to use the I don't know, whatever it's called, like idioms or whatever, to talk about the blood on the roots and how it's underlying effect that it's gonna be hard to get away, all that racism and stuff like that. So just knowing that there's still blood on the roots of like trees today show that there's still racism.
This song is one of the most impactful songs I would say that was ever made by an African American. Because I don't know about you all, but when I heard it, I literally felt chill bumps going through my body. Because the imagery that Billy uses and the tone in which she sings, it really hits you, and it makes you imagine a black man or woman hanging from a tree.
And I definitely do agree. The song is very impactful. And it does hit you. The music itself is extremely haunting. Um, the imagery is haunting. Everything about the situation in the song is haunting. And I think it's interesting that it's called or like the metaphor for black lynch bodies that's used is fruit, as in it's attached to the tree, as in it always grows, as in it's always there, as in this occurred frequently, extremely frequently. So it wasn't like a one-time thing. This happened all the time. It happened so often that it was considered a part of the pastoral scene of the South. Like this was a very frequent occurrence, and I think that's what makes this, or I think that's what's most haunting of all about it, is that this was a part of Southern culture, essentially. So.
Yeah, I agree. It was very impactful and also poignant because like it pulled a few strings like when you were listening to it, and I think that's what the point of music is, to like, you know, go further than just talking about it. Like it does something, I guess. So like when I first heard it, I'm like, okay, what is the strange fruit? It's like a mystery, and so you actually like put two and two together, and then you hear blood on the leaves, blood at the root, and so I like Aaliyah's point that like it's always there, like it's growing from a tree, like the metaphor of like a fruit in a body, which is a very distinct metaphor. So I liked what Billy did, and it was also really slow. So she made sure you heard it. So it's also the power of music too. You can do whatever you want with it. So like it's just a beautiful form of art. Like you can do so much with music, and it just shows. I think everyone should listen to it because like it's more than just, because most people hear about a lynching and like, oh, a lynching, especially in this day and age, like, oh, okay, you read about it, it's there, it's over with, whatever. But when you read it, you listen to it, the song, you feel it. And it's not like you're there, but you can actually like, you know, feel where this Southern culture was coming from. So like you were never there, you probably won't ever be there. So, but to feel that through music, I liked how Billy, she really touched me.
I don't know why. This is the first time I listened to the song. And it's very simple, but very haunting, especially like the trumpets between the first two verses. And the lyrics are also like, they're not subtle, you know? But I think they're also very vivid. So in my head, I was picturing like trees and stuff, but in kind of like a hyper realistic way, because I feel like the song was like I said, it wasn't subtle about what it was talking about. So that in turn allowed me to picture trees and like just very vibrant colors, like reds and stuff, like blood or whatever, very vividly, almost like a impressionist painting, with like really bold colors, and I like the song, but I don't know if I would necessarily like listen to it a lot, just because it's kind of slow. I think it's good. It's kind of slow. And I also feel like you have to kind of be in like the mood for it, you know, because it's like such a heavy topic that it deals with. Because you know, like with like Don't Hurt Yourself, you can like add the meaning to it, but with this one, it's like already there, so you can't like really interpret it any other way than like, you know, like the lynching of like black men and people like in the South.
There is like, I've never really thought about that question. Like, are Tyler Perry movies like helping or hurting like black culture or America's perception of black people? But now that I do think about it, I guess it kind of go both ways. I guess when you like go more in depth into the actual like characters in the movies and their situations, they do in a sense portray like stereotypical Black situations, broken families, abusive relatives, jail, going and being sent to jail, children not having parents, and I guess that all kind of attests to like the stereotypical like Black situation. But also I think in a way it reminds me of what Black authors did like back in the day. You know, like they wrote stories and they wrote novels that they knew would play into what whites believed were like how Black lives are actually lived. So because he did that, I mean, of course, white people think it's funny. You know, like they think it's hilarious. They think it's entertaining. And I guess Black people think it's funny too, to a certain extent. But I honestly feel like Tyler Perry like strategically used those situations to bring success to his movies. And like, even though the means by which he gained success, I guess, are questionable, he did in the end gain success, and that is in itself goes against what a lot of people perceive like Black capabilities to even be. Like, you know, there's people that don't even believe that Blacks are capable of being talented or being creative, but Tyler Perry did that. So yeah, to answer your question, I guess like his characters do more towards the harm. They do more harm than good in that context, but there was definitely a method in place, I believe. So.
To tangent off of what Aaliyah said, Tyler Perry's movies definitely don't help the community. I don't see how his movies would help our communities, because just I can't name a Tyler Perry movie that hasn't had one single Black stereotype or has made fun of a piece of Black culture, and like Aaliyah said, used it as a device to attract bigger audiences and basically just get a laugh off of Black culture. So I do believe that Tyler Perry's movies, they're closer on the side of harming the Black image in America, because if you show a Tyler Perry movie to someone who's never met an African American or Black people period, or that hasn't had a lot of experience with Black people, then they're gonna make assumptions. They're gonna be human. They're gonna stereotype all Black people. So yeah.
But then also, I would just like to say that even though he does use like Black stereotypical situations in his movies, in a sense, it's kind of like a reclaiming of those stereotypes. Like, he's taking those back and saying, like, I'm going to use these for my own personal success. And that success is the success of all African Americans, like, across the board. So, I mean, I guess that's the other way to look at it, too.
May we first start off by you stating your name?
Dr. Noelle Chaddick.
And how did you get the title of doctor?
So I completed my PhD in philosophy in, the Doctor of Philosophy in Philosophy PhD. So my doctorate is in philosophy, interpretation, and culture.
Okay, and what made you want to become a professor?
So, I went back to college as an adult to get my MSW, Master's in Social Work, and kept sitting in classroom after classroom with faculty, white faculty in particular, who would say really incredibly racist and homophobic and classist and sexist things, and they would present those things as facts. And I just had kind of a moment where I realized that my calling was to educate the people who served the people, right? That I could have a narrow impact if I became a social worker, but that I could have this much broader impact if I started to educate social workers. And then that kind of spread to wanting to educate social workers and teachers. So I came from SUNY Cortland to Rhodes College, and we were a huge teacher education college. So I got a chance to spend 8 years teaching teachers. And I think, producing 100 teachers every 4 years is kind of the level of impact. And then I got really passionate and excited about impacting higher ed itself. Right? At some point I realized, it's not just an issue in K through 12, but we have the same issue, right? So I became passionate about producing culturally responsive and critically engaged professors.
Okay. And so through the process of learning that you wanted to educate and motivate these people to become, I guess you could say, have knowledge on racial issues, how many of those issues did you face yourself?
Mm-hmm. So I always say I should have been a botanist, right? So I could study flowers all day and then go home and be black. Because there are days, right, like the confluence of being black, teaching blackness, looking at race, being raced, experiencing racism, handling racism for an institution, and then being the mother of black children is a lot. And so at any one point, the last 3 weeks, right, worrying about the racism that has kind of been vomited all over the country, I not only have to worry about what's happening at Rhodes College with students, I have to worry about what's happening at home, now 1,500 miles away, with my children, especially my black male children, and I have to worry about, what I encounter from day to day. And so very rarely do I actually get to spend time with my own stuff. I'm usually dealing with other people's stuff, largely.
And do you ever want to give up?
That's a really great question. Yeah, I don't think I know what give up means. I definitely take mental health days, however. So I don't think I've ever had this huge moment where I was like, I'm done. I've had enough. I think I have moments though where I'm like, you know what, I cannot do this right now. And so I have ways of kind of just creating space for myself to just kind of heal. It's like your brain gets raw after a while, and you just need to take a break. So I don't think I've ever thought about giving up. It's never really felt like an option. If I give up, who's going to do it?
And so, is that your motivation, or would you say something else would be?
Yeah, I don't think I ever actually think about my motivation. I guess I'm driven by the realities that are not shared through our education system. So for me, it's a matter of fact, and they are facts that need to be translated to as many people as I can translate them to, in the hopes that we create a broad population of folks who all know the facts. I get very frustrated by the way in which we get everything kind of packaged on Facebook, on social media, on TV, the news, and so I just want people to be able to critically think, and I really am driven by, the successes for me, which are seeing a person of color be able to articulate the realities of their lived experience and yet not be pulled down by them. I'm driven by seeing a white student look at their privilege and their implicit participation in racism or homophobia, right, and move through it to become a leader and a co-conspirator, right, and not be shut down by their guilt and shame. And I guess I just imagine a world, and I have since I was a little girl. I was the worst child ever, because I just always thought the world, that I deserved better, that I was in fact exceptional, and I understood that it was my blackness and my womanness that kept people from seeing that exceptionality. I don't know if that's, narcissism or what, but I just always knew that I was being undervalued and underestimated, and it was based on my race and gender. And I've never been able to accept that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The last one was a great question. I've never really thought about my motivation. They pay me.